Hey, this is another throwback video today. This is my review of the McFarlane Matrix Reloaded Chateau Scene. It is a deluxe playset that released way back in the early 2000s. It released in 2003 specifically, and while growing up, seeing toys like this in toy catalogs is how I learned that toys can be something a bit more than just the usual kid stuff that I was seeing on TV. These figures, while possibly sold in traditional retailers in America at the time, were not sold in the regular stores here in NZ. I was very lucky enough to receive this as a birthday present just a couple of years ago. This is a toy in quotations because really it's just a statuesque piece with some assembly required. We have a couple of accessories here, but mostly they're just display options, and there's some minor articulation, but again, this is all entirely just for a display purpose. The Matrix also received a couple of standard of the time McFarlane figures, which I also adore. I have almost the completed series, but currently I am missing those two twin figures. There was also an action figure line from N2 Toys, which I believe released alongside the first movie, more traditional action figure like toys there. This toy was sealed at the time that I received it as a gift. Of course, now though it has been opened for a few years, the box is giant. It's one of the bigger pieces that I have in my collection. We've got images of the toy rendered all over the box. Today I think it's a bit more common to see artwork from the movie or the TV shows all over, so it's really cool to see some preliminary images of toys everywhere instead. I've tried to pack this away as best I could. You can see that the packaging here really has taken some damage over the years though. We have some vague imagery of some of the other inclusions here as well. Just aesthetically speaking, I really love this little set. The series has always meant a lot to me, especially while I was growing up, so to actually have these toys in hand a couple of years ago really meant the world to me. The back of the box is pretty interesting. We have a description on the toy hyping itself up, and we can see a couple of the other figures here released in the wave. Like I said, I'm only missing those twin figures, so hopefully sometime in the future I can complete this collection. A very quick description on the set and the McFarlane license, showcasing that this was based on the second movie with more toys available in stores. And then this group here, which consists of the figures that make up waves 1 of 2. Neo and Trinity are based on Matrix 1, Morpheus and the twins are from Matrix Reloaded, and if they were conjoined, these three would create a little scene. McFarlane toys in the earlier days were all about these diorama-like displays, which was something that I really loved the look of as a kid, but I had to wait until decades later in order to acquire some of these myself. Interesting packaging detail here. None of the figures are holding their weapon accessories. Weapons as accessories have been a contentious discussion over the past couple of years, so it's interesting to see that it looks like that was a topic of discussion that was always stigmatized. Now opening the toy and removing everything from the package, this is what we're left with once everything has been removed. There's still a little bit of plastic protective covering the figure here, and every accessory has been laid out on the sides there. A few weapons, a couple of display parts as well. If I take everything away though, we can first take a look at the figures themselves. This here is Neo, who was the first Matrix toy that I ever got to own, so I really loved this when I first opened him. I can't compare now because I don't actually have them on hand, but these figures are slightly smaller than the single released figures. This outfit of Neo is my personal favorite appearance out of the series, so for sure this was a really important item for me. Face detail wise, it's okay. Early McFarlane was pretty hit or miss, at least for me, more so than today. It looks like a stylistic Matrix toy. It probably doesn't necessarily look like Keanu Reeves to me though. His coat uses a rubber-like material as opposed to the hard plastic that's been used for the rest of his body. He's got some cool details on the parts here, like these lines that go all the way down the jacket. His articulation is very minimal here. We also have some head movements, very tight on that articulation. His arm can move up and the hand has a little bit of movements there. His other arm looks like it can move in the upper joint, but I just couldn't really get it to do anything, so it just rotates in the elbow joint, no real bends here. The hand can also move around. We then go straight to his legs, where there is just some rotates here, but there's no bends or any other movements like in the knee, which we're used to seeing by now. The feet have some movements, but otherwise that figure is pretty static. There are no bends anywhere, but there are rotates in most of the important areas. Then we have this goon figure here, one of the only Matrix figures to be made where the character in question is just a henchman guy. It's this character right here from this scene, and I'm told that this is now actually blockbuster director David Leitch back in his stunt performer days from Lily Wachowski herself. This toy is really interesting because he is so much more tied towards a specific pose compared to Neo. This guy's body is all contorted to look extremely dynamic once he's in display. No difference in the material used anywhere on this guy either, just all plastic all the way through. I filmed this poorly because I do struggle to get any articulation here, but I watched a couple of videos online and it appears as though he does feature a couple of twists in areas where it looks like he can move. I at least think his arms feature some form of movement, and I'm guessing mine is just struggling a little bit due to its its age. I didn't mention it before, but you can see that both figures have small gaps in their backs. That's for the display options that we'll be taking a look at once we set the scene. The display itself, even on its own, looks great to me. I love diorama display for action figures like this. These things are few and far between when it comes to the toy lines that I personally collect. I know that NECA do have a couple of options out there for their Ninja Turtles line. The issue then comes in price. I guess I'm pretty picky like that. I really want displays, but I don't want to pay hefty prices. The detail on this piece is really great to me, a spiral staircase here, and really it resembles a mansion-like build. The entire piece is a plastic material. The back here shows off some of those moldings and the screws that are used to keep everything in place. There's really cool dimensions to this where it feels great for scale with other toys from other toy brands. Like, I could see this being worthwhile for people outside of the Matrix fandom if they just really wanted a great display scene for, say, their superhero figures from the Marvel Legends line. The sticker's used here for the ground details and it covers the entire floor area. The steps, like I mentioned, it's the exact same plastic as the rest of the build. It does feel pretty sturdy enough though, and toy-like at the same time. The main piece here, I think, is the statue, which is somewhat rubbery. It makes it easy to assemble because this part does separate away into segments. The cape there is barely connected, the entire piece just comes away, and you hide the fact that the cape isn't connected anyway because that's where David's gonna go. The whole thing can split away at the exact parts where you expect articulation: arms, body, head, legs. It's really interesting to see how all of this connects together, and the reason it all breaks apart is for your crazy display. Another small bust is up here as well, and a small shield-like decoration. You can see a whole bunch of small clips here too. This bust is also removable, and it's the same material as the main statue. This part can't interact with that statue though. It could have been cool to see if you could swap these heads over or something. So this is me showing the basic idea of a crumbled display. Just setting the parts down gets the general idea across, but dynamics are really what sell this scene, because for our accessories we have these poles which can hook into the backs of the toys and connect into the display on the walls. We also have this mace-like weapon just for decoration mostly. The larger shield piece here with these spear-like weapons sticking out of the sides is a very thin plastic material, and one of the parts that I'm always worried about breaking. We have a little plastic bag here that's just full of swords and weapons alike, all display items though, since neither of these figures do have any ability of holding onto the weapons themselves. Some closer shots of what each of those swords here look like: a thin blade and a larger one. I have Gambit here to show off that these weapons do actually fit into the hands of other figures from other toy lines. Looks like a smaller Hobbit-sized weapon here though. That thin blade also fits in the hands of someone like from McFarlane's Future Toy series. It just needs someone with a bit more of a tighter grip. And the final accessory here, we have some pegs and connectors which I've never actually opened. First assembly, we place this connector at the top of the wall here, and this is just how we link the mace into the scene. It stands just like this, and it's a menacing looking display piece. The shield is a strange one. We first need to remove the bust, and then the shield can attach onto the wall there. Then this bust is placed back into its slot, and now it sits in front of that shield. It's a little tricky to work with here though, so just making sure to be cautious about not breaking anything. Then, one by one, slowly we assemble each sword into its section. Looks like the thin blades go directly underneath that bust, and then the larger ones underneath there. We have 4 thin blades in total and 3 of those large-scaled ones. The final part here is the statue, which currently sits in a bunch of pieces because we have all of these really cool clear connectors. You're supposed to connect these into the holes, and now you can have parts flying away from each other like it's causing some damage. You're even given the option of completely removing the pegs that the statue has originally in its place if you'd like to get even more display options. Ultimately, it makes something a little bit like this. We have the torso flying there, the arm is flying off, and the neck as well. There's other combinations that you could choose though. Setting the statue in place here, this is what it looks like once it's all been fully assembled. I personally though prefer it to just be pretty simple and have just the plain bust. Another connection can be made here, the goon towards the statue. The goon figure does have a gap in his back. This is where a peg can go that connects him to the statue's shoulder. I've got a little bit of difficulty with displaying him like this though. It's a lot easier for me to just balance David here in the gap between the statue and the steps. That's also pretty dynamic enough for me personally. I think it really works well. The last connection here is Neo onto that wall. Connect the pole onto his back, and now we can place the figure against the wall, and it looks like Neo is hurling towards the enemy. Overall, the display for this looks great, albeit there's not a whole lot of action figure toy-like play that goes on here. The last thing I really wanted to highlight was to show the size comparison if we were to swap the figures out for some other future brands. So this is simply a comparison between Hasbro Marvel Legends figures and the McFarlane Dune figures, and as you can see, the display still works pretty well for these figures. That's my quick look at the McFarlane Matrix Reloaded Chateau Scene, a deluxe toy that I really enjoyed putting together. The piece is rather large, and it spends most of its time set away in its packaging these days, but it's still a pretty important piece for my collection. I really hope to have it on full display again in the future. future. If you enjoyed this throwback video to an older McFarlane toy, I do have other videos on this channel covering other 2000s toy brands. Liking this video and subscribing is appreciated, and I hope to see you all next time.